Welcome to Piece by Piece, an exhibit by the African American Quilters of Baltimore. What follows is an interview with several of our members. We've been meeting for over 25 years to share inspiration, to share techniques, and to just give basic support to anyone who is interested in the history and appreciation of African American quilts.
Well, my grandmother was a quilter, and so was my mother. And I used to watch them quilt, and I had to help my mother quilt. What really got me started was I saw a quilt that a friend of mine had made while she was laid off. And I was really surprised that the quilt was not a utility quilt. I had been used to seeing utility quilts. My mother had made quilts for my sister and I, and my grandson, and my granddaughter. And I was surprised to see the quilts that this lady made was art.
I started quilting after decades of sewing, beginning as a child, turning into a career. I was a 40-year home economics teacher, and it evolved into quilting somewhere along the way.
So I was thumbing through the Baltimore Times, and there was this announcement for a quilt show or a quilt workshop at the Benjamin Banneker Museum in Annapolis. So I went down, and at the end of the workshop, you walked away with a panel or a quilt block, and you had to bring a picture, and the facilitator had all of this fabric and all of this stuff, and it was just amazing.
And I started sewing at a very young age. My mother used to thread the needle, and I would do my little sewing for doll clothes. And as I got older, one of our neighbors let me use her Singer treadle sewing machine. And a couple years after that, I had a great aunt that treated me to my first sewing machine. It was a New Home portable, and I only did straight stitch and zigzag stitches, but I loved it.
Well, I was always interested in textiles from a little girl. A lot of times when my siblings and my cousins would be out playing, I would watch my aunt sew, and I'd lean on her machine until I got sleepy. She would often find me under the machine asleep, but I was just fascinated by it. I preferred to do that to sports. I'm still a terrible athlete.
My grandmother quilted. She lived in rural North Carolina, and she made beautiful utilitarian quilts. I always loved them as I became an adult, and she started giving them away. I managed to wrangle one of them for myself, and I always thought that one day I'll make a quilt. I have a background in fine arts. I've always loved the arts, and I started wanting to work in textiles, and the thought of making a quilt just to honor my grandmother.
My friend Vera Hall and Yvonne Evans was quilters, and they kept after me to quilt with them, and all it took was one quilt, and I got hooked on it. I've been quilting ever since. That gave me a lot of inspiration, and so that's how I got into quilting. And now I'm hooked.
Anything. It could be the way that wood is carved on an altar. And each time I left the meeting, I left the meeting inspired. Wanted to do more and better.
My focus is partly from the things that I enjoy looking at in the environment, and I'm also influenced by my quilt sisters. For example, one of the quilts that I'm featuring in this year's show is called Cowboy Components, and which is a novelty quilt. One of my quilt sisters, Elizabeth Wake, made a presentation on novelty quilts. She also gave us a challenge to make a novelty quilt. I accepted the challenge and I enjoyed it.
And the first class I took was by Miss Lola Jenkins, and she used this technique called thread art, and so I've been incorporating that in my quilts. So I use that, and I'm a YouTube junkie. So lots and lots of classes, videos on YouTube that it just blows my mind.
Different magazines. I see different blocks or quilts in different magazines. Or when I go to quilt shows, I see quilts that have been made by other members, and I fall in love with them. And then I'd go online and started looking at patterns that were done by other people. And I just fell in love and started from that.
Well, one of the things that I'm proudest of, if I ever finished a project, was one that I stumbled on, which was a challenge from another guild. And that guild had challenged us to make a block of the month. They would do a block of the month, and they had a Civil War block and they had a teacup block. Well, I wanted to win the teacup, so I put one of each into the drawing, and I won the Civil War. I said, so you don't have to dispute who won it anymore. I did.
I take my inspirations from all of my interests, and I feel like I have, let's just call them eclectic interests. One interest is collecting proverbs and quotes, so some of my quilts are proverbs and quotes. I love to do portraits of people that have inspired me.
Oh, it means everything to me, because when I first started quilting, I was only making quilts by patterns. And after I got into AAQB, I started doing my own patterns and quilting on my own. I really got started when I joined African American Quilters of Baltimore. I was invited to one of their meetings, and I was surprised to learn about rulers and also the quilting equipment that you could buy as would help you in making your quilts. It was really remarkable, and I just got, and the members were so helpful.
I started quilting, it turned into a love, and I haven't been able to turn back. I just love it to death.
Oh God, it's been inspirational. The show and tell in particular, I'm just blown away by just the creativity, the ingenuity of the quilters. It's a great learning experience, and when I leave, I just go home wanting to quilt and quilt and quilt.
For these long years, I started with the original member that helped create this group, Barbara Piatella, and she actually got me started in with this group. It was a lovely group because by me being new to quilting, there were members, when I asked a question, they would show me how to do something. I was actually learning how to do quilting by hand, which was great, and then I got into these lovely machines and just went crazy about doing machine quilting.
Ms. Lumi's operation, the Women of Color Quilters Network, I've been able to learn so much about technique and about inspiration that I've been able to exhibit and be published since then. So I'm thrilled about my connection